So the housing crisis we know is bad, right? Well, it's way, way worse than we originally thought. So John Byrne Murdoch, a columnist and data reporter at the Financial Times, put together a really good Twitter thread explaining how bad the situation is. New, we don't reflect on how severe the housing crisis is and how it has completely broken the promise society made to young adults. The situation is especially severe in the UK, where the last time house prices were this unaffordable was in 1876. He then kindly shared a graph. So what we can see is a huge dip in the cost of housing between 1860 and 1920. Then we see for 80 years a gradual increase, but nothing that screams a crisis, right? And I'm not surprised that prices have risen in this period due to increase in labour costs. Then, of course, we see the spike between 2000 and now, where 2008 plays the major role and a lack of good housing policy in response. But look at where we are now. We are around 10% the average wage, which is comparable to the 19th century. I mean, Murdoch then goes on to explain that the last time we saw house prices like this, cars hadn't been invented, Queen Victoria was on the throne, and housing was largely owned by the rich elite. Now, here's a fact which in one instance is mind-blowing when you hear it, but on the other hand, not so surprising. In both Britain and America, the most common situation for young adults used to be living as a couple with children. Today, it's living with their parents. So when people tell you the younger generation are better off, the biggest indicator that proves this isn't the case is housing. Just think about that fact again. It used to be normal for young couples to have their own house with children, and today the most common situation is living with their parents. Now, we know why we have a housing shortage, which causes an increase in prices. Plus, we also have rent going up. People can't afford a house. And when you have a shrinking market of potential first-time buyers, the prices rise, which for a lot of people, that doesn't make sense. You know, the market is supposed to recalibrate when it comes to an increase in demand. If the market acted the way Milton Friedman thought it would, housing prices would come down because people can't afford to get on the housing ladder. But unfortunately for free market capitalists, that's not how the market really works, as we can see today. Instead, wealth and assets become concentrated in the hands of the few, which is why we have a situation where private landlords exist, some with huge property portfolios, whilst at the same time we have people who can't buy their first home. With the increase in prices, we also have deposits becoming impossible to afford. You know, a deposit is supposed to be an affordable amount as a down payment to secure a house. Some deposits are more than what people earn in a year. I mean, we're talking 20, 30k. I mean, some are saying more. So in order to save that amount, you're seeing couples move back in with their parents, you know, hoping their parents won't charge too much rent or nothing. You know, do this for a few years and potentially you can get a house. Just anecdotally, instead of just reading the data, I know so many people who do this. In fact, I know many couples who move back with their parents, not even to save for a house, but simply because rent and the cost of living is too high, they can't afford it. Where is the dignity for our generation? And I'm sure most young people get along with their parents, but when you're in a relationship, hitting your 30s, you want your own space, especially when you had it before. And even though that's hardly a privilege, that's still a more privileged position than some who don't even have that option and they are stuck renting because they can't afford a deposit. Wages aren't high enough where you can, you know, work hard and save and do all the right things and then you'll make it. No, it's all going on bills and rent. I mean, I live in the city with my partner. We have comparatively cheap rent. I mean, it isn't cheap, which is why I say comparatively. You know, I haven't put any savings away for ages. I mean, we don't do much. One takeaway, we're like, shit, we have to scrimp the rest of the month. I mean, we're not doing nights out all that much. I mean, months on end, we don't go out. We don't spend money. Yet every month feels like we're scrimping, and that experience is so common. Now, continuing this thread, Murdoch shows that the median first-time buyer spends 25% of the total cost on a deposit. A quarter of a payment that you expect to pay off for basically the rest of your life. A quarter has to be paid up front. It's just so unfair. Now, he has another statistic which is fucking astonishing. And looking at this data, I think it's disgusting. I think it's inexcusable that all of our politicians aren't screaming at the top of their lungs, but they don't give a shit. The result is that it now takes 13 years to save a deposit for the average UK property, up from 3 in the 1990s, and 30 years in London, up from 4. To state the obvious, nobody spends 30 years saving for a house. The dream is over. It's insane. I just want to say, for those that think we have it easy, that life is great today. "Oh, back in my day, I couldn't afford anything." Well, here are the facts. No matter how hard it was for you back in the day, it's worse for us. 30 years in London. This leads to people using their parents. More than half of first-time buyers rely on their parents' help. This is not a meritocracy. This is not an economy based on personal responsibility. This is not a system where if you play by the rules, keep your head down, you will be fine. This is a rigged economic system, especially rigged against younger people. And it's just way overdue that our MPs actually fucking acknowledge this properly. No bullshit Labour policy of relaxing planning regulations, shit like that. I'm talking about building millions of houses, not just any type, but social housing. I've heard Labour's proposals, which look like they are targeted at big housing firms, but it's the council houses we need. The jury is out on whether rent controls work, but we should be having this kind of discussion. I think we should maybe have rent control trials to see if it can work. We are crying out for bold and radical proposals. We need to bring back building societies. We need community-led housing. I also think, a rental public option where a portion of the housing stock is owned by the state directly and is rented out at a near enough cost price. Let it pay itself over time. It will add a bit more security for tenants. We literally cannot go on like this. Like, the crisis is literally worse when the subprime mortgages caused the financial crisis in 2008. Yeah, we did nothing. Things have got worse than 2008, not better. And Tory or Labour, none of them have the solutions to deal with this. I'm going to do something crazy here. I'm going to appeal to Conservatives, if any of you are watching. And if not, share this video with someone who's on the political right. Family. The idea of the family unit is important, right? I mean, it's important for everyone, but many self-identified Conservatives believe that the family unit is collapsing and it's often blamed on culture issues. Nothing can be more anti-family than current Conservative economic policy. Surely you want younger people starting their own families in their own homes, right? I mean, the stats I showed earlier explain this is happening less and less. Birthing rates are down, right? You know why? There are so many who are putting off having kids because of financial worries. Many don't want to start a family when they can barely afford their rent or bills. Many want to have a house first, quote unquote, do it properly, rent for a bit, buy a house, have economic stability, and then start a family. A stronger welfare state can provide security for those with kids. Instead of having a child benefit cap, we should scrap it. Support people who want children. You may disagree with a whole host of things that leftists like me espouse, but when it comes to a more interventionist economic policy, we've got this right.